الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah, we'll continue with tafsir of Surah Ghafir, and with regards to the lessons learned from the verses that talked about the mu'min of Ali Fir'aun, since also one of the titles of the surah, one of the names of the surah is Surah Al-Mu'min. We'll do that inshallah ta'ala maybe Saturday night inshallah after Isha. The benefits to be learned from this story, since it needs a lecture by itself. But here inshallah ta'ala we'll continue with the verses, and we had stopped at verse number 56. Verse number 56, إن الذين يجادلون في آيات الله, Surah Ghafir, Surah number 40. So Surah number 40, verse number 56. And we'll go briefly till ayah number 60 inshallah, if depend on the time inshallah. We'll start with the recitation inshallah. If you're ready. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الذين يجادلون في آيات الله بغير سلطان أتاهم إن في صدورهم إلا كبر ما هم ببالغيه فاستعذ بالله إنه هو السميع البصير. لخلق السماوات والأرض أكبر من خلق الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. وما يستوي الأعمى والبصير والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات ولا المسيء قليلا ما تتذكرون. إن الساعة لآتية لا ريب فيها ولكن أكثر الناس لا يؤمنون. وقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم إن الذين يستكبرون عن عبادتي سيدخلون جهنم داخرين. Transition of the ayat. Indeed, those who dispute concerning the signs of Allah without any evidence having come to them, there is not within their breasts except pride, the extent of which they cannot reach. So seek refuge in Allah. Indeed, it is He who is the hearing, the seeing. The creation of the heavens and earth is greater than the creation of mankind, but most of the people do not know. And not equal are the blind and the seeing, nor are those who believe and do righteous deeds and the evildoers. Little do you remember. Indeed, the hour is coming, no doubt about it, but most of the people do not believe. And your Lord says, call upon me, I will respond to you. Indeed, those who disdain my worship will enter hell rendered contemptible. طيب. إن الذين يجادلون في آيات الله بغير سلطان أتاهم. إن في صدورهم إلا كبر ما هم ببالغين. This is the second time in the surah that talks about those who argue or dispute the ayat of Allah. The first one, كبر مقتا عند الله وعند الذين آمنوا. This is something that is greater, the greatest wrath from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He subhanahu wa ta'ala hates those who would dispute the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oppose the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also the believers, they do the same thing because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hate this action from them. Here in this ayah, إن الذين يجادلون في آيات الله, also those who dispute. And يجادلون في آيات الله, what is the meaning of يجادلون في آيات الله? Dispute with the ayat of Allah basically means they're pushing away the haqq with batil. You have haqq, the truth, the ultimate truth. And what is the mujadala here? They argue to push away the haqq, to make the haqq looks like batil, truth to look like falsehood, and the opposite. So there's no one worse than this. No one on the face of earth is worse than not just a disbeliever. He's a disbeliever and he argues and he tries to make the falsehood looks like the truth and the opposite. And if they do that, they don't have any evidence. So how they would do it? They would do it with all kinds of corrupted things. And they would know themselves that they are corrupted, especially if the truth is presented to them. The example of that is Fir'aun, as mentioned before, and those, the like of Fir'aun and the leaders of any evil or any distorter or any deviation. If they know the haqq, the way that they do it, whether to spread rumors or whether to take people away from the same subject and all kinds of things, accusing the believers of all kinds of false accusations and not being to the point of what they're saying. إن الذين يجادلون في آيات الله بغير سلطان أتاهم. They have no evidence. It's not like they should find evidence. They have no evidence, no sultan, no authority of evidence that they have been given whatsoever. Because ayatullah, the kawniyya and the shar'iyya, as we said, the universal ones, nobody dispute this. The shar'iyya ones, the religious ones, it has to be, if someone wants to debate, for example, in something like this, it has to be based also on the wahy from Allah. So if people not understanding something in the wahy from Allah and the revelation from Allah and the ayat of Allah, they bring evidences from the ayat of Allah to understand. Other than the ayat of Allah, it's all going to be falsehood if they try to oppose the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. بِغَيْرِ سُلْطَانٍ أَتَاهُمْ. That means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that would give them this hujjah and this sultan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposes them. What is their reality? What's in their hearts when people would argue against the haqq after the haqq has been presented clearly? إِن فِي صُدُورِهِمْ إِلَّا كِبْرٍ مَا هُمْ بِبَالِغِينَ. In here means there is nothing. In the meaning of ma. That means ma fi sudurihim. There's nothing in their hearts except kibr. So you get to know what's in the hearts. So you don't have to say, well, I don't know what's in your heart. I think you're sincere. No. There is kibr in their hearts. But the haqq is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, not your opinion that you make up and you think it's the haqq, and then you would say that you have kibr inside of you, that's why. No, we're talking about ayatullah. So ayatullah subhanahu, if someone is presented to him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship. And they would say, no, there can be images, idols, people in their graves, they can be worshipped besides Allah, all of this, and they still argue after the matter has been made clear to them. Then what the reality of them is, they have kibr in their hearts. And it's not that we are becoming victorious when we say you have kibr in your hearts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing that to the believers so that they don't continue to argue. It's someone that you don't argue with him after the matter has been made clear, and exposing what's in their hearts. إِن فِي صُدُورِهِمْ إِلَّا كِبْرٌ مَا هُمْ بِبَالِغِينَ. They have kibr, they have arrogance to follow the haqq. And the haqq requires a person to humble himself to follow it. When someone has kibr, he would reject the haqq. Reject the haqq. If the haqq comes and fits his desire, he would say this is the haqq, and he would be upon it. But if the haqq is not on his side, because of the kibr, he would refuse to follow the haqq. And this is the way of the mutakabbirin, those who are arrogant. وَإِنْ يَكُنْ لَهُمُ الْحَقُّ يَأْتُوا إِلَيْهِ مُذْعِنِينَ, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the hypocrites. If the haqq is on their side, they would come to it in submission. When they would come to the Prophet ﷺ, two people in dispute. The haqq is with the hypocrite one. He would say, I want the haqq. I want the deen to judge between us. Why? Because he knows that the deen will be on his side. But if he doesn't find that the deen will be on his side, he says he would find other ways. Let's go to other than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They would say that. Why? Because he knows that he's going to lose. So it's the haqq is not his objective, is his desire, which is all kibr. Even if the person looks decent and this and that, if a person is not willing to submit himself, and submission, again, as we said, that means it's not your desire, you're submitting. If it's your desire, there's no submission there. Everybody would love to follow their desires. But submission means that you're ready. If it's against what your desire is, you're ready to submit anyway because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِن فِي صُدُورِهِمْ إِلَّا كِبْرٌ مَا هُمْ بِبَالِغِينَ. مَا هُمْ بِبَالِغِينَ, that means they would never be able to oppose the haqq. They can just say things, but they can never attain their objective. Al-haqq is always victorious. People physically in this life, sometimes the disbelievers they win, sometimes the believers they win. This is how life is. But when it comes to the haqq can never be defeated at all times. No one can defeat the haqq. But the lack of the people of the haqq, when they don't learn it, when they don't carry it, when they put it in the right perspective, but the haqq would never be defeated by the falsehood. Kibr, people can say whatever they want, or they refuse whatever they want, but they cannot oppose al-haqq with clear evidence, with whatever they have with clear evidence. There is no way. So it's always something else that they would do. So it's a very clear statement. Those who would argue and dispute with the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abu al-Ali and others, they said this verse was revealed also, one of the asbab al-nuzul of it, with regards to some of the Jews, those who they claimed the Dajjal is from them and they would rule the earth. Of course they would follow him when he comes, and the Dajjal is a liar, as the Prophet ﷺ informed us. So they argue with the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Prophet ﷺ to seek refuge in Allah from what they saying and what they're upon. فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ, seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّهُ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ, indeed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-hearer, the all-seer. So this is also the ayah has bishara, has glad tidings for those who are upon the haqq. Nobody can defeat you, but learn the haqq, be upon the haqq. And the haqq again is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said and what the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam were upon. But if someone sees, for example, some Muslims, they would debate with each other over things that it's based on incidents here or there, or someone said this or someone did this. It's not the ultimate haqq, the absolute truth that is in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in many cases, and people might think that this is haqq versus batil. So we have to differentiate between what is pure haqq versus to what people might have their different understandings of what it means. So the clear haqq that's in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, whoever dispute this is nothing but kibr and arrogance inside of them. The same thing can apply with personal disputes. Personal disputes can be very made clear that someone is right and someone is wrong. And the one that is wrong, he doesn't want to admit to be wrong. This is kibr inside. And this is a very important test to the hearts. And if a person admit that he was wrong, this is not something that would take away from the status of the person or the goodness of him. This is actually a sign that he's a good person. So, and the same thing with the ai*imma of this deen. How many times the ai*imma of the deen, they would change their opinion after the haqq, the truth made clear to them. Nowadays, if someone does this, they say, see, he's not a good person. Maybe he's not upon strong knowledge because he changed his opinion. So why should we follow him? This is not the ways of the people of knowledge. وَالَّذِينَ اهْتَدَوْا زَادَهُمْ هُدًى وَأَتَاهُمْ تَقْوَاهُم. Those who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide them, they increase their guidance. Imam Malik rahimahullah did the same thing. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, as they even call it al-madhhab al-qadim wal-jadid. The old madhhab of Imam Shafi'i in Iraq is not different than the madhhab that al-jadid in Egypt, when he went to Egypt, to Misr. but many of the opinions that he was upon was changed. More knowledge and different things, but it's not as people think, changing the religion according to the environment. Of course not. It's more ilm and more knowledge and more evidences to be established. And it's all based on the ilm of the deen of Allah. So, فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ إِنَّهُ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Seek refuge in Allah. Al-isti'adha is ibadah, and it's only to be done to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then after that, لَخَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ أَكْبَرُ مِنْ خَلْقِ النَّاسِ. Before we get to that, also al-jidal, also you have wahy. The wahy is revelation from Allah, which is the text, the naql, the wahy, versus people, the reason that people they have. So they can never be opposite to each other, because the wahy is from Allah and He's the creator of reason. So when the wahy is very clear and people oppose that with their own reason, which is one of the early fitan, or one of the early diseases in the hearts of the deviant ones, the aql should understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, and then they would submit themselves to the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لخلق السماوات والأرض أكبر من خلق الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. For sure, definitely, لخلق, and Islam is to make this stress meaning that the creation of the heavens and the earth, أكبر, greater, much greater than the creation of the human beings. ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون, but most people, they do not know. So if this is the case, then the resurrection for the human beings is not something difficult for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the same thing with the human beings altogether. And you see, the more people get to see how the space is, how small we are, how we are considered like we're nothing compared to the rest of the creation of Allah. So how can someone be that arrogant when he's living on this tiny earth compared to the heavens and the earth? So they don't reflect upon this. It does not benefit them, right? So if that's the case, then people would humble themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and follow the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the heavens and the earth. But and the meaning of وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ, it doesn't mean that they do not know that the creation of the heavens and the earth is greater than the creation of mankind. Many people, they would say that. They would say that the heavens and the earth is greater than the creation of the human being. But لا يعلمون here means they do not know. That means they do not reflect upon this. They don't benefit, because the ilm is not information. They have this information, but what is the effect of that information in their life? Did they humble themselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Did they follow the commands of Allah? If the answer is no, that means they are لا يعلمون. They're ignorant, because that knowledge did not benefit them. So the knowledge is according to how it benefits. If there's no benefit from it, it's not ilm. It's not called ilm. It's not called knowledge. You can put it in the category of information. But computers have information, but it doesn't benefit from it. It's the human beings, the ones that would benefit from it. So لخلق السماوات والأرض أكبر من خلق الناس ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون وما يستوي الأعمى والبصير والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات ولا المسيء قليلا ما تتذكرون. وما يستوي, that means they're not the same. يستوي سواء, that means both are the same way. So al-a'ma wal-basir, the blind person and the one that sees, they're not the same physically, very obvious. And anytime there's an example mentioned in the Quran, it requires from us to look deep into it and think of it with your heart. What is the difference between someone able to see and someone is not able to see? The one that is blind is not something that he is less in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's a physical differences here. And the blind one might be greater, better than the one that sees, and vice versa. The same thing, everyone is the same in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the creator of all human beings, and He tests them the way that He will subhanahu wa ta'ala. But physically, they're not the same. So the one that sees physically is able to walk without any help. He's able to see in front of him and he gets his affairs done. The one that is blind, he depends on someone else. He's not able to see anything. If you leave him like that, he might cause harm to himself. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned this clear example to take it to something that it seems to be not clear for the evildoers, but it's the same thing. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَالْمُسِيءِ, the non-physical matter, those who believe and do righteous good deeds, and also they're not the same as al-musi. Al-musi is the evildoer. And then musi is mentioned versus الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, al-iman wal-amal al-salih, faith and righteous good deeds, versus the evildoer. So it shows that al-iman is the foundation, of course, and al-iman wal-amal al-salih, amal salih, righteous deeds by itself, it is of no value unless it's based on al-iman. So since the blind is not the same as the one that sees, so the same thing, there's major difference, like the difference between the one that is blind and the one that sees, between the believers, those who do righteous good deeds, versus the evildoers. So how can someone think that they are equal or close or the same? Our ways, our speech, our actions should not be the same. Would you follow a blind person to take you to drive the car for you, and he's blind in a road that is full of curves, and then right there is a cliff, and it's gonna, if he's not, if a person seeing, he has to be very careful. Would you trust a blind person to drive you to your destination like this? Insane only would do such a thing. So how can a believer trust someone that is an evildoer with matters of guidance, that he would guide him? There's no way. He does not have guidance. So how can he guide someone else? So when it comes to matters of what's haqq, what's batil, what's right, what's wrong, guidance, we seek guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not guidance from the evildoers. And to be warned against, when a person is an evildoer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best who would repent and who would receive the forgiveness from Allah. But an evildoer, someone that would prove for himself to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how can that person be trusted? How can you trust someone if he disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knowingly? How can he be faithful to you? Or you trust him when he disobeyed the creator of the heavens and the earth? He will betray you too. Right? So this is all things to be aware of, and first and foremost our own selves, that a person should be upon al-iman wal-amal al-salih. But the Quran makes the matter very clear. And the same thing in the day of judgment, وَامْتَازُوا الْيَوْمَ أَيُّهَا الْمُجْرِمُونَ, the people will be completely separated. فَرِيقٌ فِي الْجَنَّةِ وَفَرِيقٌ فِي السَّعِيرِ. Group in Jannah and group in hellfire. So that clarity and this distinction, this is how far away they are in the hereafter, also with their actions in this life that are completely different. قَلِيلًا مَا تَتَذَكَّرُونَ, very little that you would be reminded or benefit from the reminder. Very little that people would benefit from the reminder. When we know that means what? We need to be from the few, not from the majority. قَلِيلًا مَا تَتَذَكَّرُونَ. Even though the human beings have been given the tools and the means to remember and to take lessons from these types of examples, but very little those who benefit from the reminders for so many reasons, one of which is they want to follow their desires. They don't like to be patient with these matters, as it's mentioned in the Quran. The shayateen, they adorn the evil for them, all kinds of things. So when you read the Quran, it makes you that you want to be upon the haqq, even if you're the only one. And the haqq becomes clear. It's not like you're called to be a stranger or among the few for the sake of being a stranger or among those who are few. No, the objective is to be upon the haqq. If it's at times or places where many people are upon the haqq, mashallah, this is great. If you're the only one, be prepared for it. Be patient with the truth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed. So it's very powerful, very clear. And this is how the Quran, kitabun uhkimat ayatu, book that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made its ayat very clear, very precise, and the examples in it are very clear also. So وما يستوي الأعمى والبصير والذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات والمسيء قليلا ما تتذكرون إن الساعة لآتية لا ريب فيها ولكن أكثر الناس لا يؤمنون. Indeed, الساعة, the hour, the day of judgment, لآتية, for sure, no doubt, it will come. And comparing that to what's mentioned, the creation of the heavens and the earth is greater than the creation of the human beings. So what is in the resurrection of the human being? Nothing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ما خلقكم ولا بعثكم إلا كنفس واحد. Your creation and your resurrection is exactly like one nafs, one soul. And you see this miraculous thing happening every day, many, many times, when life is given every day. And life is taken also all by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. لا ريب فيها, no doubt in it whatsoever. ولكن أكثر الناس لا يؤمنون. Here لا يؤمنون is mentioned. They don't believe in it. They deny it. And also they do not know, if they know that the day of judgment is coming, but they don't benefit from that knowledge. They don't act upon the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will resurrect them. ويل للمطففين الذين إذا اكتالوا على الناس يستوفون وإذا كالوهم أو وزنوهم يخسرون ألا يظن أولئك أنهم مبعوثون. When someone cheats in the balance in buying and selling, don't they know that they will be resurrected? How can they do such a thing? And this is always the disease and the weakness in the heart, to put forward the benefits of this life and to ignore the hereafter. The last ayah, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. And Allah, your Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ادعوني, make dua to me, invoke me. أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ, I would respond to your dua. إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادَتِي سَيَدْخُلُونَ جَهَنَّمَ دَاخِرِينَ. Those who arrogantly turn away from the ibadah of Allah, they will enter Jannah داخرين, humiliated, very small, humiliated, not small in physical being, but humiliated. So this ayah is clearly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is instructing the believers to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the dua here is asking and also ibadah. What is the meaning of ud'uni? Make dua. The first thing that comes into our mind is that we raise our hands and make dua. This is what the dua means, but this is not what all the meaning of a dua. A dua here means al-ibadah. That part of the ibadah is that you make dua, that you ask. So there is dua of al-ibadah and there is the dua of al-talab. You're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is dua, and the ibadah is dua. So when you make salah, salah is dua. Salah is dua. When you do any act of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is dua, because you're seeking the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the evidence? Where did we get that from? The rest of the ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ عَنْ عِبَادَتِي. Those who arrogantly turn away from my ibadah. So ad-du'a ibadah. Ad-du'a huwa al-ibadah. As the Prophet ﷺ said, that ad-du'a is the ibadah, which means the dua is the ibadah. I mean, the ibadah is nothing but dua. So not just asking, but everything is ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn Kathir rahimahullah, he mentioned some of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. مَنْ لَمْ يَدْعُ اللَّهُ, whoever does not make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, غَضِبَ عَلَيْهِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is angry with him. And that's why it's a daily act of ibadah that we do, and by the mercy of Allah, it's not left to our, whether we remember or we forget. If you make salah, you're making lots of dua every day. And one of which in Surah Al-Fatiha, the best dua, اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. And in the sujood, you have dua. Before, after Takbiratul Ihram, before Surah Al-Fatiha, there is dua. In ruku' there is dua. Subhanaka Allahumma Rabbana wa bihamdik Allahumma aghfir li. And in sujood and at the end of the tashahhud, there is dua. And outside of the salah. So to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as some of the early generations of Islam, they would say, they would make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even for the salt of the food. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will for it not to be there, it won't be there. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for everything, and to ask Allah from the bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why? Because those who arrogantly turn away from the dua, they will be among the people of the hellfire. The disbelievers, they don't make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or many of them, they do not make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala unless they are in dire need, which is does not benefit them, only benefit them in this worldly life. وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised for the acceptance of the dua, that He would respond to the dua. You're not making dua to someone that doesn't hear you and doesn't know what you're saying and does not respond to you. He responds to you. But the respond is not the respond of a human being to a human being. This is the response from the one that is nothing is the like of Him. And that's why when we make dua, when we make ibadah, you're worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing is the like of Allah. One of the very evil things from the human beings, because of ignorance, they will a'yadhu billah, because they don't know the aqidah in the right way, they in their ibadah, in their life, as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as if He's a creation, like the creation of Allah. So they would expect from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what they would expect from a human being. If you ask a human being for money, if he doesn't give you money, that means he doesn't want to give you money, for example. That's a human being to a human being. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing is the like of Him. And the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encompasses everything. Are you asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for, say for example, worldly matter? You're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for money, and you don't care if He throw you into the hellfire afterwards? Is that what you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for? As long as you have money, you don't care if you become a disbeliever afterwards? Of course, a believer would never want to be like this. If he's given the choice, he would choose al-iman over everything else. So al-istijaba is, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, is one of three things that a person would make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Either he gets what he asked for. This is in worldly matters only, and only in matters of this dunya. Either he gets what he asked for, or equal evil will be pushed away from him, or it will be delayed for him in the hereafter. This is, the dua is accepted, but the acceptance is by the perfect wisdom of Allah. When it comes to matters of deen, matters of the hereafter, the dua is accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in only one form, which is for the person to enter Jannah, for the person to be guided. That's why the dua is in everything, in matters of dunya and matters of deen, but the most sincere one is the one that is to establish the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, the Imam Sa'di rahimahullah, he said this is from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his great ni'mah, that he is calling his slaves to what is best for them in this life and in the hereafter, by commanding them to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dua al-ibadah wa dua al-mas'ala. We have to remember these two, the dua of al-ibadah and the dua of mas'ala, asking. And he promised them that he would accept their dua, and he warned those who arrogantly turns away from the dua of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether the dua of al-ibadah, when they do not worship Allah or associate partners with Allah, or they don't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they would, as a result of that, they will enter Jahannam, dakhirin, that means very humiliated. Why? Because they turned away from the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala arrogantly. So as a result of that, the recompense or the punishment from the same sort of deed. So dakhirin, that means someone is small. Something becomes very small. And it's also sujadan lahum dakhirun. The believers, they do this in this life. The ayah says they won't enter Jannah. They would enter, the disbelievers will enter Jahannam dakhirin, humiliated. The same word Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used about the believers. When they make sujood to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sujadan lillahi wa hum dakhirun. They make sujood to Allah when they are, the believers, humble to Allah. So if a person wants to be protected from being humiliated in the hereafter, humble yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life. Because those who will be humiliated in the hereafter, those who were arrogant in this life, when it comes to the deen of Allah, to the ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the reward is given from the same sort of deed that a person do. We'll stop here inshallah ta'ala. But as you see, is the ayat is basically showing the jidal or the arguments, that it's not to argue with the book of Allah, with the wahy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because there's no one can oppose that whatsoever. And the warning against the kibr. And you relate that to what's mentioned before in the story of Fir'aun. The kibr is always repeated in the Quran, which is the seed of all evil. And the kibr is what prevented Iblis from making sujood to Adam alayhi salam. And a person can be very righteous. A person can be so much worshipping Allah. Sometimes a person would ask Iblis, for example. I mean, he was in this close position to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and with the angels. And he know what's going to happen to him. And he refused to make sujood. He refused to accept a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't be too much amazed by this. You know, this is how the kibr does it to the person, to the human beings. Kibr, the arrogance, can lead the person, and he knows that he is destroying himself, but he will continue to be like this because of the kibr in the heart. This kibr is a disease. It's like when someone is sick, and like someone is doing drugs, for example. He knows that it's going to ruin him. Why he keeps on doing it when he knows it's going to be not pleasant for him? He's going to suffer so much, but he still does it. So it shows that the human beings, they can do such an evil thing and they know the outcome of it. But this disease of kibr, nothing like it. And that's why if a person is able to remove this from his heart, he is the most successful person. He would always humble himself to the haqq, to the truth, whether it's on a personal level. If your child corrected you in something, right? Humble yourself. Wallah, you're right and I'm wrong. You said the right thing. Not that, then next time he's not going to respect me, or he is going to think, then since I'm making mistakes, so don't listen to that guy. Who said that? This is all shayateen whispering. If a person did something wrong, humble yourself and say yes. Umar radiallahu anhu, when the woman corrected him, he said, Umar made a mistake and the woman is right, because the haqq was the most important and the most valuable thing to them. So why? Again, it's to save oneself. Who cares about others? Of course, we care about others, but care about yourself first. So that a speech or a word to be said with the tongue, it engrosses or makes the disease more and worse. If the kibr is small, you make it bigger, and the arrogance becomes bigger. And no one will enter Jannah with the smallest amount of kibr and arrogance in their hearts. So the verse talks about this, and this is the disease of the disbelievers. And in da'wah, if a person is able to remove that from the hearts of people, this is then what is left. They would find themselves, submit themselves to the deen of Allah. And the importance of the dua and the belief in the last day, and the total difference between the believers versus the disbelievers, and the iman is speech and actions, and many, many great benefits in this. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam.